Hundreds of years in the future, the Western democracy is in shambles and Earth is run by military veterans through the Terran Federation. Citizens who volunteer for military service get complete access to their rights, like voting and holding office, but they also have to fight against arachnids, giant spider-like aliens. This vision of a dystopian world was seen by Robert A. Heinlein in his novel Starship Troopers. Since then, many movies, video games, and comic books have been inspired by the novel and have formed a franchise with quite a bit of fan following. One comic book worth noting in this franchise is Starship Troopers Brute Creations, which explores moments before Port Joe Smith was raised by the bugs. Let's explore that comic today, but not before you tap on that subscribe button and bell icon so you never miss an update from Marvelous Videos. History and Moral Philosophy. We begin right in the middle of a history and moral philosophy class taught by Jean Rorschach. Rorschach, a no-nonsense mobile infantryman, had taken up teaching after he lost an arm in battle. Flashes of his brutal encounter with a bug are seen as one of them grips his arm during battle and pulls apart his hand. He tells his students about the bugs, their powerful resolve, and the acidic coagulant that they have in their jaws to ensure a bloody and painful death for their victims. A student asks him whether the bugs are mindless, and Jean says that they are not. Just like humans are part of the Terran Federation, the bugs too were part of a collective, and their willingness to sacrifice for the collective is what made them so dangerous, just like the citizens of the Terran Federation, who serve in the military to get access to all their rights. If this seems like a brainwashing class to you, don't worry. Rorschach does a good job telling his students that the system is forced onto the civilians who do not want to or cannot serve in the military by the strongest. As the class comes to an end, he encourages his students to get cushy civilian jobs. On his way home, he passes an enclosure where lions and lambs are living together. The board by the enclosure reads, "Peaceful coexistence, and the lion shall live with the lamb," hinting at what is coming ahead. If you're not familiar with the quote, it was said by Joseph Smith, acclaimed prophet and founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The entire quote stresses the importance of human beings to stop destroying the human race and become harmless so that both the lion and the lamb can live together. It's clear Jean does not believe in this quote, as he comments to a random child that the enclosure is probably maintained by throwing in more lambs every now and then, implying that the lions feasted on them every now and then. He soon receives a call from his superior, informing him about his new assignment, a teaching job at Dantana. A brief history about Dantana. Right before the Terran Federation was established, the Mormons had a stronghold in Utah. Once that was lost too, they decided to colonize Dantana, a planet right inside the Arachnid Quarantine Zone, aka Bug Zone. 300 Mormons successfully wiped clean Dantana of the arachnids that lived there and established a colony called Port Joe Smith. Now, the colony had its first graduating class, but no college would admit them. Why? Because of the mandatory H&MP class. The Terran Federation needed all youngsters to have a sense of morality through this class, but the Mormons found it objectionable as they believed Joseph Smith was a better morality teacher than the Federation's syllabus. But since they didn't have any colleges, they decided to fly in Jean for a quick crash course. A cold welcome and Port Joe Smith. Jean was welcomed to the colony by Chief Administrator Edward Allen, who immediately assumed that Jean's hatred of Dantana rose from his hatred of Mormonism. Jean sets the record straight, although a bit crassly, telling him that he would not care if Allen stripped naked and worshipped a vacuum cleaner. But since Dantana was inside the Arachnid Quarantine Zone, he wanted to get out as soon as possible. The first thing on Jean's agenda was to meet with the colonists. Jean makes it pretty clear to them that they were free to disobey all of the Terran Federation's decrees. They already were violating one by living on Dantana, but he didn't care about that. If they wanted their kids to study in the Federation's colleges, they had to meet their educational standards, which meant the history and moral philosophy class. After this brief speech, and we mean really brief, as it barely barely lasted 1 Earth minute, the colonists filed out. This kind of impresses Jean, as he sees the strength and determination they must have had to have been able to establish a colony so far away from home. The next day, he meets his class of 4 students. In a colony of 300 people, of course, the number of graduates was going to be a single-digit number. One of his pupils was Kirtland Allen, son of Edward Allen, who was there partly to get to college and partly to report back to his father. Jean's opening words to his class were simple: leave while you still can. He reminds them that they are living inside the bug zone, but Kirtland suits that off, telling him that the founders had given a full sweep before they landed. Jean, who has had more than his fair share of experience dealing with the creatures, tells him that they could only search for arachnid adults, while their eggs lay dormant for a long time. He tells them that they would only hatch when needed, like in case anyone encroached on their space. Kirtland is not ready to hear his teacher and asks how an egg can know how to hatch. Jean initially draws parallels between a seed knowing when the sun is shining, and then explains that the eggs can sense vibrations. As the primary source of energy for Port Joe Smith was wind generators, they were like an alarm clock to the eggs. Kirtland dismisses his explanation, telling him that Jean was bitter because he lost his arm to the arachnids. This sets off Jean, and he grabs Kirtland as he informs him that he lost many good men in the war to keep someone like him safe. Kirtland apologizes and blames the Federation's violent tactics, as he believes that reasoning with them would have been a better choice. This really makes us wonder what kind of classes Port Joe Smith had if a graduate thinks he can reason with big bugs. Jean, despite wanting to yell more at the kid, decides to give it a rest, as Kirtland had never faced a bug. But just as he lets him go, a loud, reverberating cr-cr-cr-cr-cr sound is heard, raising a colony. The sound immediately takes Jean back to Klendathu, aka Bug Central. Before he realizes that that is the sound of bugs making a tunnel, a few arachnids break through the floor of his classroom to erupt out of the earth and make themselves known. Jean orders all his students to get out immediately and jibes at Kirtland to go ahead and stay if he wants to reason with them. Smartly, Kirtland follows and informs everyone that they need to head to the comms room to call down a dropship that was orbiting over the colony. Jean kicks himself for leaving his weapons back in his room, while Allen directs all his people towards the temple. Jean points out that it's a horrible idea, as it would be equal to serving a platter to the creatures. But Allen doesn't listen. Kirtland hesitates for a moment to head to the temple, but does it anyway out of respect for his father. Jean breaks away from the group, and the preacher tells everyone to follow the words of the prophets that have helped them to survive persecution after persecution. His speech is interrupted by the same cr-cr-cr noise as arachnids erupt out of the earth one more time. Kirtland sees his father eaten by an arachnid, but pauses his grief to escape with his friend Zoe. They make it to the entrance of the comms room when an arachnid attacks Zoe and kills her. In tears, Kirtland radios the dropship, when, suddenly, another arachnid breaks into the building. Jean, who had retrieved his weapon, shoots at the nasty creature and saves Kirtland. Though Kirtland gives him the good news that he called the dropship, Jean is not hopeful, as he knows that there was a good probability that Kirtland had not used the right frequency or the operator had not heard the call for help. There was also no guarantee that the two would stay alive till the dropship reached them. He tells Jean to head with him to the top of the temple, as the bugs loved to travel through their underground tunnels. Jean is skilled while shooting down the deadly creatures, and they make it to the top with the arachnids snapping close behind. As they get too close for comfort, Jean hands Kirtland the weapon to shoot them. Just as they make it to the top, the dropship lowers down. Jean jumps onto it. Unfortunately, Kirtland is so focused on shooting at the arachnids that he loses footing. Jean's incredible strength is shown off here as he saves Kirtland by grabbing his leg. As they fly out of the colony, Kirtland curses out all the arachnids, swearing to kill every single one of them. The news reports on Port Joe Smith stated that there were 0 survivors of the incident. The Terran Federation didn't care enough to correct them, as it would serve as a good warning for anyone crazy enough to colonize a bug-filled planet without the authorization of the Federation. Kurt Allen made good on his promise to the bugs as he remained sane, despite all the grief and horror he went through, and signed up for federal service. He became one of the finest troopers Jean had ever ever seen. Months later, Kirtland and Jean meet again at Whiskey Outpost on Planet P, where their unit responded to a distress call. As they wait, Jean takes in the silence and realizes there are only 4 troopers with him on Planet P that he trusts not to lose it in case of an attack: Johnny Rico, Sugar Watkins, Isabel Flores, and of course, Kirtland Allen. Afterthoughts. Starship Troopers Brute Creations was published in 1997 and was created by writer Jean Stranade and artists Tommy Lee Edwards and Robert Campanella. Published by Dark Horse Comics, the comic has nostalgic coloring and memorable art. Released a few months before the first film, Starship Troopers Brute Creations is the perfect appetizer for the film. It gives you a breakdown of the world it's set in without spoiling any juicy parts of the film. It also doesn't stretch out unnecessarily and wraps up the story it has to tell wonderfully. Marvelous verdict. So this was our dive into the Starship Trooper comic. Those of us who have watched the movie know the fates of Kirtland Allen and Jean Rorschach. But if you haven't watched it yet, don't worry, we won't spoil it for you, but you have to go watch it. Like right now. Let us know what you thought about the comic in the comments below. And if you liked the video, you can let us know by tapping on that thumbs up. We'll be back soon with more explorations, and until then, stay away from the bugs. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.